tardes
Good
a todos
morning, good afternoon to everybody who has joined our second session of this webinar series of how women are affected by the free trade between Europe and Mexico. It's part of the campaign that the Mexican and the European organizations have been holding to stop the European Union Mexico Global Agreement. And this agreement, which is a economic association in terms of politics, it's called a global agreement. And since 1997, and then with the ratification and the signature of uh, the trade agreement in the 2000, it has been developing throughout time, and with human rights and democratic clause that was considered as an exception and something important. Unfortunately, that has only been a small adornment, and it hasn't had uh, a real legitimacy status. And what we have been stating is that there is a reality in our own countries, like Mexico, as well as the other side of the Atlantic, in the European people, where there is a constant violation of human rights. And what we want to express is exactly in what regions and in what places of our countries these violations to human rights are happening, occurring. So that's why we uh, are going to have four amazing women speakers of organization, spokespersons of these organizations, and not only are they're just fighting and struggling to defend their land, their territories, their dignity, and their lives. So, so they will be speaking by turns, and I will introduce each one of them. At the end, we will have the opportunity for those who are participating in the webinar to ask questions in a brief way, and also make comments, brief comments, so we can have an opportunity to engage in this dialogue and this conversation that we're going to have among women, and that this is not the first seminar, this is the second one, and it's not only for women, but it is for everyone, for men, women, and for anybody who is interested. So, and first, we have Marce. Maria, I just posted the link for the letter against the modernization. Yes. And the campaign, we have drafted a letter that talks about the 6 reasons to not ratify the agreement. And then there is a link there. So whoever is interested in joining and signing this letter, you can go to that link that you can see in the chat that you have right here. So we have Marce. She's a spokesperson for the peoples again in the defense of the land. In Tlaxcala. Marce, we're ready to listen to you. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Maria, for I appreciate this space being provided and that you give to me so I can speak from the place that I am currently. As you may know, I participate currently in the defense of the water. Uh, uh, in the Choluteca region peoples defense of water. We defend our water. We continue to raise our voices, and we continue organizing and defending from our communities. And in terms of the question that you are asking me, the question is how women are impacted by the free trade of Europe and Mexico. And unfortunately, we are deeply impacted in many ways, not only economically, but politically and socially. For example, in the economy, it hasn't gotten better in our country. On the contrary, it has gotten worse because we live in extreme poverty. Those of us who are working class, um, and the only people who have benefited are the big corporations, the one who exploit us, the one who marginalize us. And in terms of employment, they continue to be very low, unjust, and badly paid because we work 3 shifts. The salary are misery, and we do not have any insurance or benefits. Our contracts uh, are very precarious because they can fire us any day that they desire or want to fire us, and the only person who benefits is the business owner. And due to these injustices and lack of opportunities, migration continues to grow to the United States, and unfortunately, many people have left there. They have gone as migrants, and many of them have lost their lives, unfortunately, in our region, in our community. And in terms of political matters, the big corporations, they basically support the bad governments with bribes to then basically just dispatching it towards like the destruction of our resources and our lands and natural resources, and they do not comply with the Mexican laws, and they contaminate and they affect and they assassinate our Mother Earth, dear comrades. And that's the vision of those big corporations, those transnational corporations, is ferocious. They don't comply with the laws due to the high corruption that we have in the country, due to the cheap labor and the great natural resources that we have. The European companies and the foreign companies continue to see this as a very juicy business to invest in our country. And as women suffer double the effects due to the conflicts that these corporations generate in our territories. Um, we have to bring all that responsibility of work, of education, of family, and towards the social struggle. And the worst, to lose a husband or a child for defending our rights, for leaving our homes, for continuing. Unfortunately, for all of those reasons, we're marginalized. Um, and I see the example of the compañeras from Ayotzinapa who lost their children, their sons, and they have to continue demanding what happened. They don't have an employment that they can continue to sustain them. So in summary, the free trade agreement between Europe and Mexico has never brought benefits for us. They continue to ransack us. They continue putting us in slavery, and they continue making us sick and assassinating us. And worst, they continue to kill our planet with their irresponsible industries and those who benefit from that, and the powerful people. And that makes us very, very mad as women who are always raising our voices, who are always organizing, who are always doing this despite how we're marginalized, and we're tired of this. We have to continue raising our voices, so to not allow that this bad government continue extracting all this nature from us and selling it to other countries, that all they do, all those countries, is that they come and they steal from us, they make us sick. And the worst of all is that our lands are already contaminated. And that's what all that I wanted to add.
Marce, y en el caso de las...
Marce, and in the case of the region, what's happening in Morelos, in Bonafón, in integral project of Morelos? Well, I can say that, for example, in terms of the gas pipeline, we have stopped it for 10 years, maybe longer. And that pipeline that we have in our land, it doesn't work. It's useless because they did basically the worst quality, and it's been 10 years underground. And we have earthquakes. We have the Popocatépetl volcano that erupts all the time, and it's very close, as well as Socavón, maybe 250 meters away from it. So imagine the natural disaster that all of this causes upon us, that pipeline is useless at this point. It should have been underground 3 meters, and is basically at 1 meter underground. So, and this is the stuff that they've come to put in our communities, in our lands, and half of the town is crossed by it. Eh, the socavón, it continues to grow. September 19th, um, there was a big piece of land that went down with that earthquake on September 19th. So I just think that they just want to kill us with all these things they're putting on the community. And today there are some help, but the government doesn't really care. They only care about money. They only care about capital. They only care about having relationships with and these entrepreneurs and just getting their money. And all we want is for these disasters that are being put on our community to end. And also, um, due to the company Bonafont, this is a French company from another. Due to the massive extractions, they will take us would take millions of liters of water. Imagine all of that. This company extracted it in one day, and for 29 years they were taking our water, and we want to denounce it because since 2014 it got and there's been pure corruption because they're not even owners of the company because it's under the name of the Arcoiris company, which is one that started that. And what we say is like, look what everything that they caused, but the sinkhole happened based on this company that took our water. And that's the issue that we have here in our communities. And we also want to denounce and say that the National Guard, when they came to take us out, which is the February 15th, the three levels of government came to take us out, the municipal, the state, and the federal. So our government has never been with our people, and that's what they took. They evicted us, displaced us very cruelly at 1:20 in the morning, and we are very upset. So the militarization of the country, and we marched yesterday. Yeah, we marched yesterday due to the militarization that this president Manuel Lopez Obrador, he's on the side of the companies, and he said that he was with the people, that the people first and then the people again. And we're seeing that no, that he is betraying. Well, he already betrayed us because he already did all of this. because he wanted to continue with the gas pipeline. Also because of his fault, the Bonafont company came back to our community. So imagine what all these governments are doing to us. We don't trust them. They don't represent us. And in the militarization, it's already the declared war to impose those projects of death. That's why I call them. But we're not going to allow that, because we're going to organize ourselves. We're going to continue defending what is our natural resources. And the governments don't represent us. And as he said in a declaration recently, that the people save the people. So we knew that he was never gonna defend us as community. And we made it the law of the people. It's where the government needs to obey what the people say. And because the governments are our employees, and the people should be able to decide, and the people should be able to be the one have a say. Thank you, Marce, and thank you so much for all that energy and defending everything that has to do with life. And we're going to continue, and we're going to have the chance to speak a little bit more. And for now, we're going to ask Cari. She is a Nahua woman, Teposteca by birth and by heart as well. And she is an active part of the Youth Front in Defense to Tepoztlan. She's a founder of the Red Mujeres Collective in Tepoztlan, and which purpose is to prevent and eradicate violence against women and in defense of the territories. And she was also part of, you know, of the people's assemblies of Morelos. I guess the Morelos integral projects, and belongs to the group of Indigenous Women's Group, which is a community-based group from the National Coalition of Indigenous Women. And Cari, you have the mic and the voice to speak now. So, good morning. My name is Karina Vara Rodriguez. I live in Tepoztlan, Morelos. I was listening to Marce, our comrade Marce, and I was thinking that many times women, we look for ways to defend our territories. And there is a colleague, Adriana Guzman. She's an Aymara comrade of the Yala movement. And we have an indigenous link throughout the continent, and we have to identify where we are located, and we have to realize that the system that surrounds us, and that this system is a patriarchal system, it's a capitalist system, and neoliberal. So from our situation of being women, as well as seeing that the priority many times in the majority of the government is an economic good. Everything is basically being seen as money, and a lot of the ills come from that. And well, so how does the free trade agreements affect that? Well, I remember I was very small, and I got to see the government of the president of the republic, which is Carlos Salinas de Gortari, which is I was about 8 years old. And I remember how December 28th, All Innocents Day, there was a joke that said that the dollar had regulated, and that from 12 pesos it was worth 3 pesos. But it was like an April Fool's Day joke, because we were in a hard economic process. From 3 pesos, all of a sudden it was 12 pesos, and continued to go up and up and up, and it costed a lot. So in my mind, as a girl, I didn't have an idea how the coin or the how it was worth like that. How makes a country be rich and what makes a country be poor. So what makes a country in development, as they call our marginalized country, and what is the first world. And really, I'm not really good in understanding economic terms, but to uh, and and people in the that value monetary value.
que es el vivir bien, que viene desde esta visión capitalista, que es el vivir bien.
Which is having a good life comes from a capitalist perspective. What is that? We are following this line from the people and communities when we migrate to cities because of any given reason. Having a good life means having a house, a car, a stable job, being able to go buy groceries, to be able to have some small luxuries, to things that you like. Then you may want to wear nice shoes, maybe use trendy brands. You need to use a good dress or a good purse, something that is not off brand. A society that is measured by its brands and the market. That is the idea of globalization that sadly is permeating not only in big cities, but little by little is going into small communities. And this is eroding us and it's making us vulnerable in the face of this capitalist monster. Why do I say this? These free trade agreements make us get to know the goal that, according to the Secretary of Economy, is this exchange of different goods between different countries. The ultimate goal is to strengthen the economy of both countries, of all countries involved in this trade agreement. Like quite often, they don't take into account the production and the spending power. And in many cases, countries feel invaded by these foreign products. And because of this status thing that I told you before, that we can buy all of these things, we start buying these new brands. So we see our own products as being worse. There was this thing we call chafa mix. We used to say, don't buy this because it's chafa mix. If it's from a multinational company, it's a good product. But if it's a product made in Mexico, it's not so good. How does this perspective of things starts to change? What belongs to your identity, to your origin, is ugly, is worse. And what comes from abroad, we have this term that we use in Mexico, Eurocentrism, that is starting to permeate, because what is European or what is from the United States is better, is more beautiful, is better made, is better quality. And this starts invading our communities. I will just like to mention a small example, something very simple. which is the exchange of things that in many places is still a tradition. From the CONAMI, the National Confederation of Indigenous Women, I call it from Cristina. For over 30 years, this colleague led the Committee on the Market of Exchange, because people bring wood to exchange it for other products. This is not wood that is purposely chopped, it's just collected from the forest. We have this exchange market in Morelos. It's an economy that is not based on currency. There are a series of initiatives, such as the use of also more exchange. I realize that some come to show us that this is this new economic model, but this is something that these communities have been used for a long time. Some communities have crops of nopal, apple, plums. Some people do trade in the city and bring in more products, and then people from the communities can access it. There's a different way to make an economy work. And it's an economy that is not based in capital, because we are not entrepreneurs. We are not here opting for this big, large multinational companies are going to offer our communities. However, we know the big capital that these companies are going to invest in our countries, in our governments, is going to have a direct effect. We're going to have our own land taken away from us. They're going to attack our land. Many of these projects, there was this example, the comprehensive Morelos project. When we first started hearing about it, we knew these were projects for development, or so they called them. It's just to be a mining project that was supposed to be sustainable in the south of the state. It's close to the communities of Teclama and Fuentepec, Amazatepec, and Niatacal. So we started hearing about this thermoelectrical plant, power plant, and a gas pipeline was going to come to, it was supposed to go across Puebla, La Escala to reach Morelos. Is what my colleague mentioned before. An aqueduct also was going to be built. Most of people in these communities work on the fields, and many of the water that they needed to water the crops was going to use to cool the turbines of this power plant, and to be able to reach this area that is far away from Mexico DF, they will need to build an extra motorway. And within this Morelos comprehensive project include the enlargement of this motorway. This connects Mexico DF and Morelos. And from Morelos, it connects with motorway 21st century that goes into the city. What do all of these projects imply? We don't know if they have enough environmental effect reports that should be there. Many of this land is being bought on the black market. We have this agrarian group. The owners of the land are not the entrepreneurs, nor not the business owners, not the federation. It's the indigenous people who work in these agrarian groups that many times end up being broken up and bought by governments. We know that there are several regulations that need to regulate this use of the territory in many areas. For instance, the agrarian registry, and there's this whole bureaucracy that is supposed to be there, created by the state. But in the end, all of this ends up being exploited, lacking sanctions, lacking follow-up. Marce was talking about the gas pipeline and the sinkhole. If we ask ourselves about fracking, something that we're seeing all around our country, it's not just in Puebla where they have introduced this. We know that fracking is destined to extract oil from the earth. Which companies are behind fracking? Are these national companies? Are they transnational companies? We would need to talk, even if they were national the national companies, who from our country are there to be direct beneficiaries of this? We can talk about Mexico as a multicultural country, but we don't talk about Mexico that is made up of small nations of peoples and communities. We have to change this view of the economic perspective we see of things. When we talk about a free trade agreement, we're talking about an economic system that is based on the neoliberal and capitalist system. How does this affect us women? Why? They take away our identities. This Eurocentrism, but clothes are better if they're brand names. I was thinking about all of the polemic about Zara and a French brand. I cannot remember the name. Because there was a lot of talking about the cultural appropriation, about the fabrics, the textiles, and the embroidery from Mexico. Small things are being noted now. They take away our identity, they take away our territory. This is important in the daily life of everyone. So when I was 6, about 30 years ago, I didn't know about economy, but I knew that listening to that was something bad. Hearing that the economy was going down for its country was going to make things worse. So we will need to focus on a sentence. I hear a colleague from Bolivia, Hugo Blanco, who said that making money so that they're wealthy people, it means that poor people need to exist. And the wealthy people are going to always be thinking about making money, no matter who or what. So this production machinery, they're not going to be concerned about destroying forests. They aren't going to care about ending water. They don't care that fracking continues as long as they keep making money. We used to think that this economic thing is not going to hit us because we're used to having breakfast, having beans for frijoles for breakfast and dinner, but now even beans are expensive. So this world situation has an effect even on the food we consume daily. I don't like talking about global economy. I think it's important to see how these free trade agreements have had an effect because our economy is not stable. It doesn't have all of this structure. How many Mexican products are invading Europe and how many European products are invading Mexico? How many large Mexican companies are well positioned in Europe and how many large European companies are well positioned in Mexico? Cari, we could leave things here. Well, I would like to talk about how the economy has an impact even on our daily lives. It's not this monstrous thing where we cannot have any effect. Of course we can. We can go from the daily life. Thank you, Cari. We'll have the opportunity to keep talking. Now we have Eva. She's in the west area of Mexico. She's a lawyer and she's focused on advocating for indigenous peasant communities and collective rights. She belongs for the Collective for Autonomy and she's a member of the Network for the Defense of Corn with another organization, which is Alliance for Biodiversity, that is in Latin America. And she also works focused on common goods. Eva, you have the floor. Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm going to begin by reflecting on how since 1994, when the first free trade agreement was signed between Mexico and the United States, I think it was exemplary because a series of reforms and adjustments were done that changed the regulations that had to do with the achievement of the peasant indigenous fight in Mexico, the revolution, which meant to regulate the use of common goods in a social way. With this signing of the free trade agreement, there was a reinforcement of the Constitution and all the laws that had to do with water, land, the fields. Ever since this treaty was signed, Jalisco decided to become an agro-industrial giant, and this was managed through liberal free trade policies throughout the whole of Latin America, where all countries want to be leaders in the agro industry, and this is completely modifying traditional ways of life regarding agriculture, consumption, etc. When COVID came, the state of Jalisco decided there was a huge opportunity for export when people and communities at the local level were going through this huge crisis of the loss of biodiversity, lack of access to food and water. All of these policies had terrible consequences. They created systemic violence, migration, high levels of pollution due to the technological agricultural packages that are added to all the wrong policies that were promoted by the Green Revolution. And in this supposed modernization that is just stimulated of the resources for the industry, we are including great amounts of plastics, metal, and many liters of pesticides that also create even more toxic waste, where they abandon thousands of polluted containers. Young people, men and women who were owners of their own land, who work the fields, they have become hired hand in their own lands. The state has promoted this way of doing things. They keep saying that they are making a lot of money, that the state is making a lot of money, but it's not. It's just the large companies. These companies are not producing.
These companies are not producing things like berries or avocado, which are not luxury. The avocado, which used to be a local consumption product, now it's at a price that is inaccessible. Right now it's 90 pesos here. When we have more than 30,000 hectares of ancient forests that have been deforested, that are now being harvested for avocado. And now there's for the food industry, there are the large farms. For women, this has become very complex and impossible. Women, we never were landowners that we have inhabited and cared for, so we have not been able to make decisions about the use of our territories. So by consequence, the majority have become laborers, and here in the region, specialized labor for a fine produce like cherries or berries. Their health, the health of women and our families has decreased due to the labor conditions that they have to endure, and the permanent exposure to chemicals, and the lack of water is a lack of access of work to the domestic use, the problems, the health problems in the communities, and men, women, and young people. And there's also an additional load for women. Men die due to violence, due to these regions of the agro industry, or illness, or they migrate for the opportunities for dignified work, which lets women marginalized in their territories and be able to make decisions or have the legal certainty of the property of their land, and that leaves them without any defense. I want to tell you a little bit more about a very close case here in Jalisco, which is the San Isidro community. The San Isidro is a community that is indigenous, that is in resistance. They requested their lands during the land reform in 1930s. They were workers They lived as peasants in a farm, and they decided to leave from that violence and semi slavery conditions, and partially they were given 50% of their lands. Since then, since 1930, they've had to demand the full return of their land after many trials, and for more than 80 years, they have been able to have the rest of the lands be handed to them. In this month of July, the main obstacle for them to be able to get their land back was precisely the state of Jalisco and the federal state that were basically in bed with like a transnational a company, which is agro-industrial massive company, and they were denounced in the context of being able to have a binding agreement that regulates transnational corporations in terms of human rights. In 2017, we went to the analysis of this agreement, of this project, in UN at Geneva, to show how these transnational companies of other countries, they violate the human rights, they violate the laws, and they cannot be judged or tried in our ongoing trial in their own territories. We have to go to their state of origin to be able to take them to court, and that makes it difficult. So the third and fourth generations of peasants of San Isidro are currently accessing the land. The context is very depressing because for 80 years, it was a very peasant countryside, community oriented, of dreams, of illusions. Currently, the context is agro-industry and producing for the export of grapes, berries, or agave for tequila, avocado, sugarcane, and among other products. And they have been surrounded, they're deforesting, contaminating, and the population is with high levels of illnesses involved with this. All these industries, agro-industries, agribusiness, have contributed to the loss of biodiversity in the region, where there used to be a forest, where there used to be a diversity of plants and animals. Now there is arid land with things like grape being and that's the kind of land that San Isidro just recovered. That's the current context, and the pressure is that they need to like rent or sell the land. But they have been a community that has pushed for more than 20 years agroecology and organic agriculture in the midst of this context. In the south of Jalisco, as well as with other scientists who are being committed, we have shown the bad effects of chemicals in the health of children of this region. It's clear that what we have shown is not just for those who have just provided their urine for their testing. A lot of these chemicals are from European origin, and now with the war between Ukraine and Russia, there was a whole input of chemicals in the region. So the fight to sustain the countryside life, that fight is being led by women and girls, and who are showing the paradigms of the Green Revolution. We know that it's a fight or a struggle for life, and now we're going to be better when the big agribusiness falls, which basically rural women from San Isidro and all the region, and from many communities in Jalisco, are the main protagonists. We also consider that a big agro business is like a war. Even though it's not publicly declared, they come, no matter the laws, no matter anything about the legislation, the destruction, the how power is being diverted, you know, how the big corporations are in bed with like governments and big powers. They do whatever they want. The justification for this is that they are generating economic development, that they're producing food when they wouldn't produce anything because they consider that those forests or those mountains that were there preserved were not productive, when in reality, the people of the region have been feeding themselves at least 30% from what the land naturally produces. There are a lot of food in the region that are gathering. We're not talking about prehistoric times. We're talking about current, like pitaya, guamuchi, monte, and all these other fruits that are being named that are very nutritious and allow them to have health, to do not harm the environment, that do not require a risk, and that do not require chemicals or industrialization. But everything is regulated in favor of the big agribusiness. And even though the transnational companies cannot be tried in the Mexican territory, it's very difficult to defend. The people in the communities are, first, they arrive in Guateteras, and they are mainly involved with the big agribusiness in Europe. And the first thing that they lose is the forest, and then it's the water. The water in the communities is not enough since they arrive. 8 years ago, we have to take water by rural communities. They always had their own waterways, clean waterways, non-contaminated, and they always had it available. Now there is no water. That we're exporting to Europe avocados and water, and devastating the forest and the biodiversity. To defend women, we need to put our bodies, because there's no defense mechanism. Everything is deregulated. The quality of life and the health is going down, and it's an abuse, all these agreements, because we're importing what we call chile de árbol, which is the main importer. Temacapulín, which is also is defending from flooding, the possible flooding due to a dam that is being built due to an international, to a Spanish corporation. To end my reflection, I think that it is important to say that 500 years ago, more than 500 years ago, taking advantage of the current day, they arrived from Europe and they conquered us, and they took everything. They ransacked. The main objective was to look for riches, look for wood, the minerals, and that devastation that hasn't stopped. That has been constant. And with all these treaties, what they want is to regulate, so they can justify from the European Union, and that they're doing it in a legal way and continue this kind. They have not been able to apologize for all the devastation and the genocide and the destruction of culture in America. In the Americas, they have not been able to acknowledge it. They continue partying on the Hispanic Day, and they don't recognize what they have taken despite everything. And now they want to perpetuate this with these new free trade agreements. So it's impossible what's going on here. And as our colleague was saying, Karina was saying, they don't really care what happens here. They have no idea because they can't love what they don't know. They can't love the diversity that happens here, the culture, the relationship with the territories. But what it is a true is that rural women and the women of the world, with this sense of community that we have, of it's more of a genetic thing. It's something that moves us to take care of what's collective, life. And I think between us, with as well as our comrades, we can stop climate change. And climate change, the only way to stop it is to stop free trade, that each from their home, from their house, from their own territories can produce what they need, that they consume what is close to our territories. I know no more than 100 kilometers, that we are responsible with what's happening, and we are leaving the people decide their own futures from their own cosmovision. Free trade agreements are being devastating, and they are a motor for continuing climate change, which is something that affects all of us around the world. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Eva. So we're adding a series of in these presentations that we're giving, and despite the violations of the people are rising and fighting for their own conditions. And this day yesterday, which there are those who celebrate the October 12th, and they celebrate it as a great accomplishment. Finally, and the free trade agreements are a tool of colonization in another way, but they're also tools that are inhumane, that affect us in all of our communities. So we're gonna provide the mic to Atahualpa Sofia Inciso, inhabits in Salto, Jalisco, which is a municipality near Guadalajara, and belongs to the collective Un Salto de Vida. And through this, the organizations are organized for a dignified life against devastation and the defense of life and the territories. Thank you, Atahualpa. Thank you for everybody for the invitation and for this space to speak about this problem that concerns us all. So I would like to first start by speaking about the free trade agreement has impacted our communities, and to a point that it generates currently a dictatorship of normality, where growing next to a contaminated river or a space completely devastated is normal, and it's with what we grow up with. We live by the banks of the Santiago River, one of the most contaminated rivers of the country, and by the state, it's recognized that there are 1,900 toxic substances, and they affect our lives and our health in terms of they affect more of our lives, our everyday life, where we have to survive. And one of the things that I would try to do is to provide the context. I thought of using some slides to speak about this, and to speak about this world. In the world of capital, we have to just look at our town here in Salto, Jalisco. I'm going to try to give a little bit of context to my words with some of the situations that we understand when living in this territory, even when the decisions of those above has been to make us sick and impose sickness and death, and we continue to fight for a dignified way to live and now and for our future generations. We live surrounded by a area of sacrifice. We're 3 blocks from where I am right now. We have the Rio Santiago, the Santiago River, 100 meters is the there was 5 tons of trash to our populations, and on the front of there is high security prison of Puente Grande, one of the biggest prisons of the country for the longest time. It has a lot of control and policing of the populations. Then there is the landfill, and then there is a distribution center for Pemex for gas, which also generates it's known in Mexico as Huachicoleo, which generates a lot of control over communities. And in these spaces, there's been a lot of with all these violent movements also generate money laundering. So in the more far away area, about 1 kilometer, there's about 400 industries, of which many are transnational corporations who come to this area for being an industrial paradise, because there's very little regulation, and there is all these things that have been generated by the industry have been basically affected by populations that have been sacrificed. In this space, there is the populations
porque era cada vez y sigue siendo el olor a mierda por todas las descargas industriales y tóxicas que se vierten al río Santiago y de parte de la ciudad de Guadalajara.
From the Guadalajara city and the land to near our houses, that has made us organize ourselves and raise our voices. That is not normal that we live where we say the populations start suffering an extinction because
perdiendo entre todos estos problemas que nos aquejan y que nos
because we're all losing with the adding up of all these issues. In my town, plastic, we have plastic banknotes done by the bank. We have big companies such as Pepsi, Honda, Disney products, Danone, Yakult, Coca-Cola, among many other companies I could mention. And many things are not a consumption product for us. They belong to a chain of supply. Among them, we have Honda. They do the same quantity of cars. They were saying they did 325 cars a day. Of them, they spent around 450,000 to 600,000 liters of water per car. That means there was enough supply of water for the communities. We went for 3 or 4 months without any water in our pipes. However, the supply of water must be guaranteed by the state for the companies, for them to be able to keep their chain of production. Those who can pay for water receive it, but to us it means that we have become very tired as a community, because we have to wake up really early to be able to have a little bit of water for our homes. That has also led us to have many problems of disease and death that makes things even more difficult for us as women to have to work and care for those who are ill. We have to share among each other the medicine for patients because of the many companies or the many diseases that are happening in our region. In this devastating cycle, as young people, and we're becoming a generation that is being buried by their elders. So we're no longer a young people, a young group who had no voice, because the state and the big multinational companies, the corporations, decided things on our own territory, and we tried to scream as loud as we could so our voice can reach everywhere. So it's impossible for others to replicate the model of what they're doing in our region, in other places. We want them to know that we know that they're lying to us. These big corporations, they came, they sell development, progress for future generations, but now we're generations that are being used as free or very cheap labor for the industry. All the education is aimed towards covering the needs of the industry, of these large corporations. For us, it's important to point this out. There is something that is going on. They're deciding about our own lives. So we want to stop this. We want to talk about this. We decided to raise our voices. And we do this in every shape, manner, or form, because this is a moment of emergency for our generations. Each day that goes by, each death of our elders, it creates a loss of the memory of what our paradise resembled, what this river that gave us life was like, this territory that gave us strength. And now we have this fight, this resistance together with nature, with river that is alive, with many spaces that are still surviving on a territory that is being increasingly controlled and consumed by the decisions of those in power. That's why we decided to do this outside of political groups, of the support of these industries. They're trying to do this greenwashing. There are many companies here that are receiving our carbon bonds. They're considered socially responsible, corporate responsible companies. But you cannot walk through this territory without finding their waste. They're making us ill, they're killing us. As women, this has mobilized us to fight for life. We believe that we're fighting to be able to survive. We're living to fight. We don't want to live like this for the rest of our lives. We want to be able to achieve a fair living now. And that's it. That's what I would like to share with you today. Thank you, Atahualpa. We have the opportunity now with those of you who are there who would like for our colleagues to say more about what they have talked about before. And you can do so by using the chat.
Mientras revisan, yo quisiera señalar que es impresionante cómo
I would like to say in the meantime that I think it's very shocking to see how years go by. It's been over 20 years that these fights have been happening, and they have an effect anywhere in the country. Some battles are being won, even if not the whole war. But I would like to point out, I think it's important that here in the state of Jalisco, we have the Coca community from Escala that for 23 years, this business owner from Guadalajara, an invader, he appropriated from communal territories from the Coca community, and he prevented them from working their own lands, their own fields. That united voice of the people from the land, after 23 years, they finally received back their land, their territory, after a peaceful legal battle that was quite complex. They were victimized, they were criminalized by the defense of their lands, as it happens in many instances, as in Morelos, as our colleague Samir Flores, that was killed, as many advocates for the lands, for the environment. They have been criminalized. It's really important to see this example that they provide us, this patience that they've had, that these communities who advocate they didn't quit their defense, and they finally won after a lot of suffering, about facing lots of difficulties. But in the end, this is a major win. Maybe the participants would like to say more things, or the colleagues who are listening to us within this seminar would like to share anything or participate somehow. Karina, would you like to say anything? Now that you're mentioning Samir, he was part of the Permanent Assembly of Morelos. There was an articulation they presented in the state against the Morelos project for the defense of this territory. He was victim of an attack. He died. So far, we haven't found justice for this loss. And now with all of this news about the hackers and the Guacamaya case, there's a link with organized crime. This very complex tissue it comes from other countries to establish these projects. And it's also done through authorities, through the governmental system. And this problem of the organized crime, I think the colleague from Jalisco was talking about the avocado fields and how there are deforestation of areas to create single crops. And at some point, the price of avocados went up so much that it was organized crime who was running these crops. So this is just an example of how things are happening. Thank you, Karina. Eva, would you like to mention anything? Okay.
Pues no, nada más que decir que es muy complejo, realmente es muy complejo lo que sucede a partir de...
It's very complex, everything that is happening. It's bringing from the free trade agreements. Doesn't matter if it's North America or if it's the EU, the result is the same. It's the hoarding of resources, it's the destruction of the environment. It just deepens this global issue of destruction of nature, of the common goods that will allow us to be here in this world. So it's very absurd, as Karina was saying before. The wealthy want more money, they want to hoard more, there's no social, environmental, health, community awareness. And women and men from these communities and these territories, they are fighters. No choice. You either defend yourself or you're killed, your children die. As Sophie said, there's no future for us because our young people are dying, the territory is destroyed. We have no other choice than to do that. This is unsustainable. There needs to be awareness about this. In 2017, I had the opportunity to be in Geneva during this conference about the free trade to regulate human rights. It's amazing the pretext that they use to not even talk about it. Only some MPs from the European Union listened to us and promoted it. But overall, they say that this is not necessary, that even everything is regulated under the free trade agreements, that regulations are already in place. But the truth is that these are just trade regulations that make things better for them, but all of the rest is deregulated. Everything that is not regulated is allowed. Or until we decide who is the culprit, then we have destroyed 20,000 hectares of forest. And everything is touched by organized crime. There's nothing where they're not there. Currently, there's not one company where they are not present. Here in the case of San Isidro,
si puedes hablar más, no tan rápido para las intérpretes.
Can you talk a bit slower for the interpreters? Sure. I forget, sorry. Multinational companies, in the case of San Isidro, it was very complex, but not because of the legal matters. The community of San Isidro proved from the beginning that they were the legitimate owners of the land. Since 1940, they proved through different administrative and legal processes that they owned the land, that they had a right to that land. And it was not returned to them because since 1985, this Unway company came, they installed themselves, they sign an agreement in Jalisco because they consider it made more sense for the company to own the land because the peasants didn't know how to use it. So they sell themselves. They hired a legal firm to prevent the land to be given back to the peasants. Only they just receive 50%, and the other 50% will be received from here to January. The community is being organized, but it's quite complex. You go to court, you have to show your rights. In the case of El Salto, they're asking us for evidence. All of this evidence can be seen on the health of the people who live there, of the health repercussions that all of this has done. And even with that, they question whether this is truth or not, but this is absurd. We need to bring this to justice. Free trade is not necessary. We don't need this to sustain life in this world. It's important to have this room for reflection so that we can create, we need to be positioned about these topics and don't wonder whether this is or not a complex issue. It's not easy to organize an assembly with all of us. But when we are able to reach a consensus, we are capable of building solutions for this crisis. I think we can really find the way in peasant communities in Mexico.
¿Alguien más quiere intervenir?
Anybody else would like to add anything? Yes, Marcelina, thank you. Marce, go ahead. Yes, well, I appreciate from here, from Choluteca region, from the municipality of Juan Ceponilla, the Juan Ceponilla municipality. I appreciate this opportunity, and I want to propose that these European corporations or non-European corporations that we come at them with the highest responsibility of the responsibilities them and make them comply with the Mexican laws, and if they don't, we can apply the rules of the people and make sure that our autonomy is and self-determination is validated. Only organizing the people will bring these changes, because otherwise we will not be able to do it only with ourselves, within the community, within the organization, from where their people are, so they can organize themselves and bring this forward. That's all I can add. And thank you so much. Thank you, Marce. Atahualpa, do you want to add anything else? Maria? Yeah, there was one person from the public that wanted to. We allowed them to speak. Maria Ida? Yes, let me see. Yes, we can hear you. Thank you. I was going to ask the people that expressed It's a wonderful talk about what you're saying. Is you don't understand the big things. We don't understand what the free trade agreement. Oh, because I don't buy or sell anything in foreign, buy anything, but I don't know what. But in the plate of beans, you can realize. I congratulate you. I hope we can have more of this. I hope it gets recorded because it was a wonderful talk about the economy from the people. And I know that right now there's a lot of people that say, oh, with this reality, what do I do? And those of you who exposed, you spoke about the alternatives, about what we can do against the big monsters. So I congratulate you all. And I appreciate the capacity that you have to transmit, and the struggle is hard. I imagine you all, but I know this is going to be of great value to people. So thank you. Anybody else from the public that you would like? So Atahualpa.
Gracias. Había
Um,
una
thank you.
pregunta
There
en
was a
el chat
question in the
creo
chat.
que entiendo bien.
I think if I
Pregunta
understood
si hay
correctly,
algunas estrategias
they
transnacionales
ask if there's any
y
transnational
cómo,
strategies.
bueno,
Uh,
cómo se pueden nombrar
how can we
o
name
avergonzar,
or
¿no? Como
shame
estos procesos
some of
transnacionales.
these
Y
processes,
bueno,
transnational
nosotros
processes?
es algo que
And
hemos como
this is
empezado
something
en
that we have started
2014 a
working on in
discutirlo en
2014
Alemania. Hay
in
una
Germany.
como una
We
iniciativa que
did
se
an
llama Academia
initiative,
Feminista,
which is the supply
que la
chain.
intención
With the
es, como
intention,
decía, que
I was telling them that
población
is that our
una grande
population
transnacional
is a
responda
great transnational,
y ella
and
para poder abastecerse
to be able to
necesita
supply,
alrededor de como
she
2,000
needs
proveedores
about
para
2,000
poder
providers to be
generar un
able to
auto o una
generate
bicicleta.
a car
Igual
or a
como muchas de
motorcycle.
las empresas
Like
automotrices
many
en el
of
país que
the
producen, pues
auto
necesitan todas estas
companies, they
pequeñas
need
cadenas
all
que van
this chain
suministrando a cada
that is
proveedor.
supplying
Y creo que algo que nos ha
providers,
ayudado
right? And that is
a
also
poner las
something that
cosas
has
como en
helped
la mesa
us
es
put
poder
things on the
generar información
table,
en
is
torno
to
a
be
lo que
able to
realmente está
generate
produciendo
information
y
about
cómo
what
está
they're really
impactando.
producing and what it is
Lo
and
digo
how is
porque
really impacting.
muchas como
I say that
es un
because
proceso de largo aliento, es un
it's a
proceso
long-term
súper
process. It's a
desgastante,
process
difícil,
that's very
pero es
difficult,
bien importante
but it's very
empezar a
important
generar
to
herramientas
generate
de diálogo, de
tools
discusión,
of
para poder
discussion,
decir,
of
nosotros
engagement, of
trabajamos con el Estado, si no
conversation
trabajamos
with
con
the
el
state.
Estado,
Oh, we don't
pero
work
no
with the
por eso
state,
dejamos de ver
but that
qué
doesn't
está
mean
decidiendo sobre
that
nuestras
we
vidas
don't
sobre nuestro
see what
territorio.
they're deciding over our
Entonces,
lives
me
and our
representa un poco a,
territories.
pues
So
quizá no llegamos a
maybe
avergonzarles
we're
que
not
están haciendo un
shaming them
problema de
that they're
contaminación, porque
doing a
no es
issue
posible
of
la producción
contamination, because
industrial
it's not possible
sin
to
la
have industrial
contaminación y sin
production
la devastación, sin la
without
explotación,
contamination, without
sin todo
devastation,
lo que provoca,
without all the
pues
things that
no fuera posible el
happens.
enriquecimiento y
It
el
wouldn't be possible
el
the
gran
enrichingness that they're
enriquecimiento industrial.
involved, and
Entonces,
how that
si no fuera
broadens
por el
their.
paraíso y la belleza que
And
son
if it
nuestros
wasn't for the
territorios,
paradise that
no
our
se hubiera
territories
posicionado
are, it wouldn't have
uno de
been
los mayores
positioned
o más
um,
grandes
or
corredores
the
industriales
largest
del país en nuestro
industrial
territorio. Si no
corridors in
tuviéramos la
our
capacidad
territories,
de
if
dar
we didn't have the
naturalmente en
capacity to
agua,
provide
en aire, en
naturally
territorio
in water
geográfico,
and
en
geographical
abastecimiento y en
territory, and
potencial
in the
de quienes
potential
trabajamos acá,
of those who work
pues
here.
no estuviéramos sentados aquí.
So we would have not,
Entonces,
they would have
pero,
not settled
pero
here.
entonces creo que es
So
importante
I think
como
it's
cómo
important.
generamos
How do
información
we
que
generate
desarme estos discursos
information that that
nosotros nos
take away
aventamos el
these
trabajo, creo que
discourses?
iniciamos hace 17
For
años,
us, we started
nos aventamos el
17
trabajo
years
hablando
ago,
mal de
and
la
it was
industria
very
por el miedo a
difficult
decir la
to talk
industria
badly about the
muchas veces
industry,
nos
because we had
devaluaron y decían,
fear.
¿cómo es
Oh, they
posible y
said, show me
contaminamos?
that I'm like
¿No? Yo sí
contaminating.
tengo,
I
sí tengo el
uh,
materializado
I
y yo tengo
can
el
put
potencial
in fear,
de
and I have the
demandarte,
potential
de
to
meterte
put you in
una
jail,
denuncia por
to denounce you,
hablar mal de
for speaking defamation, basically, for all these things. So when do we do research and to process this discourse that they generate in these green dialectics and this position that they say they have respect to when we deconstruct what they're putting on our imaginaries is when we realize that there is a struggle for life that is deeper, that can be, and that is deeper. I don't know if it's understood, but I think it's important that we can, from the academic places, from our spaces, and from our own knowledge, community knowledge, we can generate information, and it's information that can be diluted into many others, so that each time those who have under our aim is not an easy road. Oh, I woke up well today, but it's my fight. No, it's not. It's a need, it's an urgent need. And it's not an easy road because they have us under surveillance, they have us controlled. They know what we eat, how we do it, who we have relationships with. So with our internal weaving, we can have in the production of space, it can help a lot, and also a lot of information. How do we disarticulate these things? So I would say it's beyond generating a global campaign that it stays on the Google cloud, that continues reinforcing the ways and the ways of dominance. And beyond that, I would say, how does our everyday fight gets reflected in other parts of the universe? We say that the fight for El Salto is a global fight, because at the end of a river, it's in the Pacific Oceans. So it's at the it's a global repercussion. So I think about it in this way. What each of us do in our space, we articulate a change. Thank you. Yes, this is the idea of this webinar, that even though we live in the country, the media, the commercial media are not reporting what's happening in our communities, in our spaces, in our territories, and the rest of the population is not aware of what's happening. So to see how we can weave this information, this knowledge, so which ways we can go dealing with these tentacles. We can have fear, but finally, there should be no fear. And the defenders were always in the struggle, despite what that means in this situation. And in terms of migration, and there has been waves of migrants that arrive to the countries, and they arrive to the countries that are guilty of the devastation that they did in those places, where they desertified the land, deforested the resources, the minerals, and all of that, and they destroyed everything, and they don't have ways of life. So they look for new ways of life as migrants, and they look for those places that originated with these situations of violation and violence in the different spaces, and how it happened in this country, all these waves of displaced people and of communities in all of our regions is also something that is so painful because there is no way um, there's this presence of organized crime um, and the obligation that some territories have to produce for the narco certain products. So this entire situation in which we are involved, despite that, we have to find the ways, and to be able to look for a better life for the present and the future, and that we hope it doesn't take longer, and that these agreements that they don't continue to persist out of the interest of what's of the commercial over the rights of people and the environment. Is there any other contribution from those who are in the webinar?
No, al parecer no hay más.
No, there's no more.
No.
Well, and we appreciate our spokespeople that have sent us this shared this such important information for all these struggles that they sustain, and that we finally see that we cannot be just do nothing to what's happening, and that we can't wait for the government to tell us or tell us about projects that we supposedly are going to move forward from these circumstances that are dividing our community in these necessities that we have. That there are communities that understand and that the displacement of their lands and their housing and other things, what's going to happen is that they're going to be displaced, that they're going to have to go to other places with their families, etc. So we continue. This is the second session of the seminary. We have a third session in which is Wednesday, October 19th, where we're going to focus on other kinds of violations of that we have as people and that affect us importantly. There is someone raising their hand. Is there anyone that you would like to add? Is there a question you would like to add? Go ahead. Is it Wednesday or Thursday? It's on Wednesday. It's on Wednesday. It's going to be Wednesdays. Yeah, this time it's going to be a Wednesday. Yes, 11 a.m. And 6 p.m. in Europe. And it's about human rights and the violence and militarization and all of that. So you are invited to join in this new session that we have. And if anybody would like to sign this letter, like 6 reasons not to ratify this agreement, with the European Union and Europe, then go ahead. And thank you so much. And we continue to be in touch and weaving information and struggle. Thank you for this. Thank you. Thank you.
Mucho gusto, Marcelina, Karina y todas.
Igualmente.
Thank you to everybody.
Encontraremos nuevamente. Adiós.
Sí.
Bye, everybody.
También.
Adiós.